Welcome everyone to More Than Money. It's obviously Wednesday, and it's time for our next page on stewardship.
Yeah.
As you know, we've been talking about stewardship for the last few weeks, and we talked about God's part in it, and that was that He is God.
Yeah.
It comes down to it. He's God, which means He's sovereign, and He owns it all. But all this is based in a foundation of love. God is love. So we don't have to fear or be concerned about His sovereignty as we would if He was, I don't know, Hitler or
terrible master
or something like that. We can count it all joy. We actually can embrace it and feel the peace of knowing that God's got this in everything that's going on. So that's His part, is to be God. Our part is to be a wise and faithful steward.
Yeah.
And we talked about what that means, and it comes down to being a wise and faithful steward means using God's resources, God's way, for His purposes and His glory.
Yeah.
And the last part's really important, to His glory and for His glory. So we've covered that, a general overview so far, but I thought today would be really neat is to break down the different the different aspects of being a steward.
Okay.
And do a general overview of that, because it's not just giving, as most people
it's portrayed that way a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Just giving.
It is, and we've talked about that a lot too, so maybe we're being that today.
Yeah.
But giving is a part of it. But I thought we could break it down and just start discussing the different aspects, the different characteristics of being a steward, a good and faithful steward. And what I've done is I've actually boiled it down into four main categories. And I'd like to just do a little overview on each one today, if you wouldn't mind joining us on this. And to talk about the different categories. And these are top level views, because each category could be broken down a little more. And we'll do a little bit of that today.
Yeah.
If you're up to it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Always.
All right. Well, let's start with the first one, which is acquiring. Acquiring. What does that mean? Well, part of stewardship is in managing God's resources God's way, means acquiring those resources. Now, we know there's different ways we can acquire things. The first one that comes to mind for most people, and hopefully for everybody, is we can earn it.
Yeah.
By going out and working, utilizing the bodies God has given us, the wisdom He's given us, the knowledge He's given us, and applying that in a way that creates earnings that we then bring into the household of God, or into our own household, which is part of the household of God. So we can earn a living, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in depth. Why go to work? And what does it mean? How much does God want us to work? How hard does He want us to work?
Oh yeah.
How does that impact our lives? And what happens if we follow God's guidelines? How is it going to impact our lives? What are the benefits? And whatnot. So we're going to talk about how to earn. Part of acquiring could be receiving gifts.
Wow, that's always nice. That's
Yeah.
my favorite.
We have a good God,
Yeah.
And He does bless us. Gifting comes from all sorts of things. I know people who receive gifts continuously because their lives are in financial shambles for one reason or another, whether it's medical or mental or something.
Yeah.
But God somehow bestows gifts, uses people like you and me to be conduits of those gifts to those people. And so they receive those gifts. But I receive gifts.
Yeah.
I get gifts on my birthday, for Christmas. I have people just come into my life, and you probably do too. People buy you lunch occasionally. You buy them lunch occasionally. These are gifts. So we receive assets, property, income, money through gifts. And another way that we acquire things, or some people do, is through borrowing.
Yeah. I do that as well.
And we joke, but some people are listening might say, "Hey, Stephen, borrowing isn't God's way."
Yeah.
And I'd have to agree with him, because he does warn us. But we're going to get in depth on that, and I hope you'll stay with me on this one. The reason I put borrowing in there is because it is such a gray area for many Christians, and it is an area that most Christians don't even think about enough. So we're going to bring that in. Of course, borrowing and never returning, that's called...
That's stealing. That's a whole different...
So
technically, you can acquire money that way.
You can,
but
yeah.
That's not what...
No,
that's not our focus.
No, we're talking about managing God's resources,
money. Yeah.
God's way, and that's not God's way. Is to steal. That's not even going to be considered in this because it's not. And although it is true, and a lot of people say, "Well, I don't steal anyway, so we don't need to cover it." And yet, so many people. I bet there's not a single person I ever met who did not steal some at different times in their life, and maybe even still in the way they do their taxes.
Yeah.
Just budgeting a number here and there, or not claiming things, like not claiming things on personal property, shifting things around so the government doesn't see them.
Yeah.
I've known business owners who do jobs on the side and take the cash in and don't claim it.
Yeah.
All that is stealing. It doesn't have to be going out and give me your wallet. There's different ways to steal, but we're not going to go there. In fact, let's put that to bed right now. So there's really three main ways to acquire, and that is earning, receiving gifts, and borrowing. And borrowing is cloudy there, but we need to talk about it. Okay. So that's the first area, acquiring. That is part of our management of God's resources. We are God's resources, so we have to manage ourselves. And what we do with ourselves to His glory and to obtaining and dispensing of His resources. The second way is giving. Obviously, again, this is the one that everybody thinks about, right?
It's probably the most talked about in churches. They want to talk about, let's celebrate God's money, bring it here. So,
which is kind of biblical, by the way.
Okay.
Actually, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But in the first century church, if you look at the church that was formed right after Pentecost, you think about that, they brought everything to the apostles, who dispersed as needed.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's a different story, and we'll get into that. But giving is very important, or is it? Let me ask you: do you really understand God's concept of giving and the blessing it is to you? Everybody realizes the blessing of receiving, but how many people really know the blessing of giving? I think you mentioned it earlier that when you give, when you spend on others, that's giving.
Yeah.
It gives you more joy than spending on yourself for some reason.
It gives you a
sounds like my mom talking to me when I was a kid.
Well, I think they had an agenda then.
Yeah.
But when I give, even if it's spending, buying a friend coffee or getting them a meal or even giving to a charity, there is a different sense of satisfaction and pride that comes with that. Pride.
So there you go. You stole the crown right out from underneath yourself. Well, we're going to talk about giving because, quite frankly, there's a lot of bad teaching about giving in the church. Not purposely, generally, but there is a lot of bad teaching purposely in bad churches.
Yeah.
There's certain churches that use it to manipulate people and do things like that. But there's a difference between being a born-again believer, the giving there, and giving in general. And we're going to go into depth of that, and hopefully you'll join us for that too. Another area of stewardship that we need to be talking about is the area of spending. Savings. I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself there. Savings. Do you know what God says about saving? Do you know, is it good? Is it bad? I mean, everybody knows about the stories of the rich merchant who decided to build bigger storehouses.
Yeah.
And God took his life and
did not go well for him. No.
So, does God want us to save? And if so, how does He want us to save, and why? For what purposes? And what impact?
Yeah. We were even talking right before we got on this, and if our treasure is in heaven, then why should we even save now? Why should we have anything now if that's our ultimate goal?
That's a good question. Let me throw out another one. What if what we're storing up in heaven somehow is linked to what we're doing with the resources in this temporal world.
I guarantee it is.
Yeah. So we need to learn what saving means to God and how to utilize it to His purpose, for His purposes and to His glory. And every time we say for His purposes to His glory, it's important for each and every one of us to realize everything that is to His glory glorifies us. Because we are in Him and He is in us. And some beautiful, peaceful, wonderful things come out of that. Finally, another category here that we need to be talking about is spending. Does God really care how you spend your money?
I don't want to talk about this.
You don't want to talk about it? What does that mean?
It's getting too close to Christmas.
Oh.
And I'm going to feel bad.
Why? Why? You feel bad? Guilty?
Well,
Because you didn't give me anything, did you?
Coal.
Okay.
No, Christmas comes around and don't quote me on this, but I think statistically, more people are tempted to borrow, to go into debt, to spend more than they make in order to make others happy.
Wow, so there's some sort of integration going here.
Definitely.
Spending, giving, acquiring, saving. All these different things come together, borrowing, and it all integrates. The graph we have here, it shows 4 distinct areas, but I tried to do it a little different. I tried to blend them, for the blue would go into the gold and the gold into the green, so that it showed that it was all intricate and one works with the other. And that's a perfect example. Is going into debt to give somebody a gift, doing it God's way for His purposes.
Yeah.
Now, the end was to make somebody happy for what you gave them, but would God say go into debt to do that? We're going to explore that too. So as you can see, there's a lot to look at here. There's a lot to cover. And each one of these categories, every one of them here, break down into several categories. And we're going to cover each area of it. And when I say we're going to cover, we're going to look at God's Word, what He says about each of these areas in our life. And then it's between you and God to decide how that application works its way out in your life. Hopefully the way it works its way out, and my hope for you, is that by going through this stewardship series with us, that not only will you have a deeper relationship with the one true God, but that relationship becomes even more real as you live your life on purpose, managing God's resources, including yourself, meaning your mind, your body, your heart, to His glory. So that day in and day out, you're growing closer and more aware and conscious of the one true God in your life. And in doing so, realizing more and more and more the fullness of Christ in your life. What does that mean, fullness of Christ? Somebody once asked me. The peace that surpasses all understanding. The joy that only comes from the God of love. The God who loves you and me so much that even while we were still sinners, He sent His Son to die for us. Talk about giving. Talk about spending.
Yeah.
Talk about acquiring.
Well, and that just proves something that I think we want to get across. Yes, a large amount of our focus is going to be on finances. Finances is a very big part of our lives, but
money and possessions.
Yeah.
Finances.
But all of this does not necessarily mean just finances. It's how you spend your time, how you give you give your time, you give your talents. You mentioned earlier,
right?
How you give the things that God has instilled into your life to enable you to affect everyone, not just financially.
Absolutely, and that's so important because we talk about money and we talk about possessions, things, and it usually turns out to be material. But remember, you are God's also. He not only created you, which makes Him own, but He bought you with a price, and that was the blood of His Son. He paid that price, and now you're His. So when we manage God's resources, each and every one of us are one of God's resources. We're ambassadors of Christ to this thing called time and space, the temporal world we live in. And how we manage our life, our thoughts.
Yeah.
Remember that verse is very impactful that we use so often. Our thoughts and our actions are a management of his resources. So we want to be able to do that over and over again and realize the depth of that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take it one step further here and go through just that little saying we keep saying over and over. Being a steward is the concept of managing God's resources, which means everything that he owns, which is
Me. And everything.
And everything.
Everything.
His way, which means in alignment with biblical principles. So managing everything he has blessed into your life, entrusted to your life, in alignment with his word and his way, for his purposes. Well, if we don't know his purposes, how can we manage it for his purposes? Obviously we need to be studying to know why God entrusted this to you, why he entrusted that to me. You know, every little thing. Why he gave some more and some less.
Yeah.
Why he gives some people more intelligence or less intelligence, or more strength or less strength, or more money or less money. And what is his purposes for all these resources in our lives, and of our lives is a better way to put it, and to his glory. You see, when it comes down to it, being a steward is an act of worship. Bottom line. A wise man once told me a long time ago, everything you do, Mark, is either an act of worship or an act of rebellion. At that time I wasn't a believer. I didn't quite understand that. But over the years of coming to Christ, growing, having Christ draw me near, put men and women, wise men and women into my life to help me grow into a deeper relationship with Christ, I fully understand that now. And I seek ways to worship him. And one of the most evident and most abundant ways that we can do that is the way we handle the blessings he's entrusted to us. Powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the next time you got that wallet out and you're starting to spend some money, am I worshiping God with this purchase or not?
Yeah.
By the way, a lot of people get so beat up on this, and I don't want you to. I want you to realize, remember, one of the purposes God has for what he entrusts you with is to care for you. And what that looks like, well, that's between you and God. But we'll talk about that a little bit also down the road.
Yeah. We were even talking earlier. This isn't just a ploy to give away all your money.
No.
To give away everything. I mean,
but send your checks to
you know, managing God's money, you know, the money that he has enabled you to have, that doesn't mean for you to just give everything away and now the church has all your money to disperse it and you've got nothing. I mean, even the slides, saving.
He raised you up to be a steward
Yeah.
for a specific part of his kingdom. And he wants you to be a steward over that. And part of that is deciding how much of that should go to help the church, to help individuals, to help your family, to utilize to his glory in so many different ways.
You know, it reminds me of a story I heard a couple years ago. A gentleman wanted to be a missionary. And he super excited, wanted to be a missionary, and he got all of his other friends excited, and they wanted to go be missionaries, but they didn't feel called. They just got caught up in his excitement. And his thought was, if everyone went to go be a missionary, who would be the ones at home writing the checks to support it?
Exactly. We all have a place, and that place is no less important than any other place. The person in the jungle eating bugs and learning to speak some foreign language to share the gospel is a very important position. So is the position that of the person who worked day and night at a warehouse to come up with enough money to send that person over and to support them in their ways.
Yeah.
So it's all good. Bottom line, it's all good, and we thank you for being with us today. And I look forward to, I hope you do too, diving in and unpacking all the different characteristics of being a steward. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be joyful. And you know, remember, no more guilt, no more shame. No. We're in the kingdom of God. He's a good God.
Yeah.
With that said, God bless everyone.